Hi, I'm Maggie Roberts, and this is a quick workshop that unpacks 3 different whole class methods of teaching. This video accompanies an earlier video that is out that's just about big picture stuff around whole class teaching within a reading workshop or reading workshop-ish environment. And I wanted to do a quick video that just talked a little bit more in detail and depth about the 3 whole class methods of teaching I referred to in that video. So the first is a mini lesson, the second is read aloud, and the third is shared reading. So the first is a mini lesson. Everything I learned about mini lessons I learned from Lucy Calkins and the Reading and Writing Project. In my early teaching days, I learned by studying Nancy Atwell and her work within writing workshops. But essentially, we want to think about a mini lesson is a skill and a strategy that the whole class needs. That is really explicit instruction. They run about, they could be 5 to 7 minutes long. They could be 8 to 10. They could be 10 to 12. Sometimes in 7th and 8th grade, they might be even 12 to 15, right? But it represents the beginning section of your time together with kids inside of a reading workshop. And so mini lessons, the mantra that I tend to associate with them is watch me, let's try together, and go get busy on your own, right? So it's like, watch me, let's try, off you go. And I usually try to make sure that I'm picking a strategy that is what one of my mentors, Mary Aaronworth, would call a high leverage strategy. Like it's something that feels like if I could explicitly model this and explicitly practice it together, if kids can go and do this on their own, it will really help them achieve the goals of this unit. Right, so if I'm in a nonfiction unit and I know a big thing that I want kids to be able to do is figure out the main idea of a text, I might call kids together and say, all right, I have found one way that I think most of us can figure out the main idea in the books that we're reading. And that is that you can skim the first sentence of every paragraph, right? We call those topic sentences. And if you skim the topic sentences of every paragraph, you can ask yourself, what do those all have in common? And that might be a window into main idea. Like, that's it, right? So I would like model that. We would try it together on a shared text. I'd listen and see how's it going. And if it's not going well at all, I'd be like, let's try it again, right? The goal of that is to show them a proficient example, right? Give them a demo. Give them a mentor to study, have them practice it. And what you're doing is you're watching and you're like, is this too easy? Is this too difficult? Do they need more practice? Kind of what I'm thinking about is I'm engaging a feedback loop, like a really mini one, a la John Hattie, by getting a sense of like, if they can't do this with their partner or on shared text, it's probably not going to go well if I ask them now to go do this work independently in their own texts. Okay, so mini lessons. It's an explicit skill and strategy. It's a high leverage strategy that most kids in the room would be able to activate in their own books. It could be as short as 5 minutes. It could be upwards of 12 minutes. And the mantra is like, watch me, let's try again, maybe even let's try again, and let's, off you go, get to work. Okay, so then we have read alouds, and my teachers of read aloud, I think about Jim Trelease's early work. I think about Lester Laminek's work. This is a brand new book out by a dear friend and colleague, Joellen McCarthy, called Layers of Learning. It's a gorgeous new book on compassionate read aloud and discussion. And read aloud, if mini lessons are explicit teaching, read alouds are implicit teaching. So read alouds are that I'm reading aloud a shared text. It might be a chapter book, it may be a poem, it could be a picture book or a short story. But I'm really kind of taking all the work of the unit. Like if I'm teaching a nonfiction unit and maybe I'm reading a nonfiction text, and I know the big 3 things we're hitting in this unit are figuring out main idea, getting curious about the words authors use, and beginning to investigate text structures. In a mini lesson, I would never do all of that because I would be there forever, right? But in a read aloud, I could plan my read aloud and model all of that, and kind of do some, I don't know, some old school moves like think alouds, or getting the conversation started and then having the kids figure it out, right? Kind of that reciprocal teaching of let's walk through this work together as we experience a text together. And it's not as explicit, but what I know I'm doing, I love to do read alouds when I'm trying to preview work that we're going to start to unpack later on in the unit, or kind of show or demonstrate how all of those things come together to create an invigorating, rewarding reading experience, right? The kind of showing it all come together, because that's really what reading and thinking is. We don't do things bit by bit or in a completely linear fashion. So that tends to take longer. It could be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. In an elementary school setting, I might have a reading workshop daily with a mini lesson and some practice. And then I might have a read aloud section that's outside of my reading workshop, pardon me. In middle school, I don't have the luxury of that much time. So sometimes I say, well, which whole class method of teaching does this class really need? Do they need read aloud, where we linger in the text together and really do some work together, showing them how, when we integrate it all in terms of comprehension and response, it creates the magic moment of meaning making? Or am I getting a sense of they just really need like a coach right now? They need some explicit teaching of one strategy, one move that they can activate as they read in order to turn the corner, if you will, with the unit of study. Okay, so we have mini lessons, we have read alouds. One is really explicit, one is more implicit, one is shorter, one is longer. Then you've got shared reading. So shared reading is another whole class method of teaching. In the primary grades, you would do all of this ideally in a day, a quick reading workshop, and then read aloud and discussion, and then shared reading every day. And shared reading is usually like 5 or 10 minutes. It's on like picture lots of teachers use like big books for shared reading, or poems, or even little excerpts of articles. And the purpose of shared reading is to experience as a class together a text that's slightly harder than what all of us can read independently. Like sometimes my teachers at the Reading and Writing Project would say something like, it's a text that's a couple of instructional levels above the norm of the class. And we're going to experience this text, like literally reading it together 4 or 5 times across the week, right? When I'm planning shared reading, I plan it for a 4 or 5 day experience that lasts like 5 to 10 minutes each. And what I know about shared reading is that it supports phonics transfer work, it builds vocabulary, it's really targeted. So with each like 4 or 5 day focus, I pick a different focus every day. Like day 1 just might be engagement. And day 2, I might say, let's really focus on some word solving. Day 3 might be fluency and cadence. Day 4 might be comprehension, right? So I kind of get a sense of like, this is a text that's a little harder for all of us to read independently. We're going to read it together. I'm going to have a focus each day. It's kind of, it activates that repeated reading, right? Which we know works unbelievably well for comprehension. And usually each 5 or 10 minute chunk that I'll do shared reading at, I have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning is usually like a little book intro, or I might say like, what's our focus? Like in this book, we might be working on blends. Here there's fruit, playing, fresh, sleep, right? And kind of the middle of it is basically doing the work together, right? We're doing the shared reading, and then we are really focusing on of the focus of the day. And then at the end, we might retell it across our fingers. We might infer a little bit. We could even do a little whole class conversation. But the idea is that I want to create a repeated experience for kids to orally read along a text with myself and their classmates, so that they can get an instructional level text that's a little bit out of reach under their belts. And, where's my kids? But I had a book baggie with me. Oh, here it is, right. So, if my kids have their book baggies and I'm doing shared reading, maybe at the end of the week, I've got some smaller copies of that shared reading text that I can put into the child's book baggie, so that then, even if I move on to a new text the new week, the kids could be practicing it. So shared reading is great when I want to engage in guided practice, when I want to do the work together, when I want to work on fluency and phonics transfer and word solving and vocabulary. Shared reading is a great way. That's a different way to introduce an instructional level text other than guided reading. And it's really fun, right? It's you get to read it aloud together. It builds community. It's fun to experience texts together. In the upper grades, I will take that component of shared reading that tends to be potentially a daily experience for kids in the primary grades, and I might put it in my small group time, right? So I might have some students that really do need to work on some word solving strategies, or I need to they're in third grade or fourth grade and I still need to support some phonics transfer, or I'm working on fluency and cadence and phrasing, because I know that fluency relates to comprehension. So I can take shared reading and put it into my small group instruction. And I honestly have seen teachers do shared reading as a whole class method of teaching, even in the later grades. So there's the scoop, right? We're thinking about different methods of teaching when I've got a whole group of kids in front of me. I got mini lessons, read aloud, shared reading. Awesome. Thanks for your time.